All right, so we've been going through Revelation and we've been talking about the seven seals. And last week we were on to the trumpets, and now we are ready to move along here with our series. So let's take a look here. And we've been talking about the seals that were broken, and we're talking about the trumpets, and then of course the vials. And we remember the timeline of the seven seals go back to the early part of the church, and then we see the trumpets a little bit later afterwards, and then a longer series of periods leading up to, of course, the seventh trumpet. When the trumpet sounds, the dead in Christ will be raised. And we look at these times as hopeful times, that as we remember Revelation, we see, and again, I've pointed out, this is not a salvation issue. We're happy to be wrong. When we get up there into heaven, we can spend a lot of time discussing whether we had this right, whether the interpretation was right. But we're taking a look at the fifth and the sixth trumpets, and they're represented as one of the darkest periods in history. It's the rise and the dominance of the Western apostasy of the papacy and the Eastern apostasy of Islam. So we had our little reprieve there where Constantine came in, and no matter what you say about Constantine, the fact that he legalized Christianity in the Roman Empire allowed the gospel to be spread, but at the same time, it set the seeds of what we are seeing, where the papacy, the pagan Rome, became papal Rome. And then on the eastern side, we're going to see the rise of Islam. And you get a whole bunch of other things. We talk about the dark period and the Islamic empires that are much of the subject of the fifth and the sixth trumpet. And they'll continue throughout this period. And they're particularly active in the shorter prophetic period assigned to them in this prophecy. The fact that both have time periods assigned to them may have been needed to confirm their interpretation, since they cover much longer period than the other visions within the seven seals prophecy. So as we go along, we saw the fall of the Western Empire, and we now see the fall of the Eastern Empire that happened. So let's get into it. So the first woe trumpet is trumpet number 5. So we see the three trumpets, the 5, the 6, and the 7th, and they are called the three woes, the woe trumpets. And the sixth trumpet contains two main visions. So in Revelation 8:13 to 9:1, it says, "And I beheld, and I heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying in a loud voice, Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, by reason of the other voices of the trumpet of the three angels which are yet to sound. And the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and with him was the key given to the bottomless pit." And in Revelation 9:12 to 13, it says, "One woe is past, and behold, three come, two woes more hereafter. And the sixth angel sounded, and I heard the voice of the four horns of the golden altar, which is before God." In Revelation 11:14 to 15, a little bit further on, says, "The second woe is past, and behold, the third comes quickly. And the seventh angel sounded, and there were great voices in heaven saying, The kingdoms of the world are become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever." Now, verse 7, slide number 7. "But the fifth trumpet contains a vision of a locust-like creature arising from the bottomless pit." And I'm sure somebody's got that. Babysitting. Welcome, Miguel. Thank you. So the fifth trumpet contains a vision of locust-like creatures arising from the bottomless pit. And it contains a specific prophetic period, the ending of which is marked by the yellow dotted line. You see that on the screen there. And so the sixth trumpet contains two visions. The first, quite similar to the fifth trumpet vision, contains an army of Miguel, can you mute your mic, please? An army of the symbolic fire-breathing horsemen. The second vision begins with a mighty and glorious angel and a little book. Both of these visions are contained specific periods. So the first two visions represent the rise of Islam among the Arabs and the resulting Arabian or Sarakian Empire and the Turkish Islamic Empire, which succeeded. Interestingly, tomorrow in my thought of the day was there was a time when the Turkish Empire captured an island in Greece. And what did they do when they captured that island in Greece? Slaughtered all the Christians there, or believers at that time. So anyway, this is an effect that is happening at this time. So the fifth trumpet, and let's take a look at the locust and the symbolism of it. So the fifth trumpet sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven onto the earth, and to him was given the key to the bottomless pit. And he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose smoke out of the pit as the smoke of a great furnace. And the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. And there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth, and was given power unto them. And of course, we'll get into the scorpions of the earth have power, and it was commanded them they should not hurt the grass of the earth, neither any green thing, neither any tree, but only the men which have not the seal of God on their foreheads. And to them it was given that they should not kill them, but they should be tormented 5 months. Now, you see the things in yellow there that are going to be really important: the grass, green things, tree, and 5 months. And this is the symbol of the locusts and the scorpions and the horses. And you'll see lions in the following slides. And the creatures are extremely well represented in the area of Arabia, just as in Australia, you might see emus and kangaroos, or in Canada, you might see grizzly bears and cougars, or in the United States, I don't know, lots of different creatures down there. But so you see the combination of these creatures that are symbolic to that area. You hear about armies, you hear about a different thing there, and it's targeted against not those that are spirit-filled, but against nominal Christianity. So the prophecy is a symbolic period. 5 months is 100 prophetic days. That's 5 times 30 or years. And this is a period that is mentioned twice. 5 literal months, interestingly, is the natural period out of a year in which real locusts are active. If you're a scientist, you'll find that interesting. And also interestingly, in the very areas where the Arabs conquered are the same areas which are naturally plagued with active locusts. So the areas in Arabia was within the Eastern Roman Empire, and the locust power was not to destroy or kill the Eastern Empire, but to grievously afflict it. The power to kill the Eastern Empire was given to the next Islamic empire in the sixth trumpet. So, and their torment was the torment of a scorpion. And when he striketh the man, and in those days shall men seek death and shall not find it, and it shall desire to die, and death shall flee from thee. And the shapes of the locusts were like unto the horses prepared unto battle, and on their heads were, as it were, crowns like gold. So just picture that, crowns like gold, and the horses are prepared for battle. And we see the Arabians were famous for coming on horses. So, and their faces were as the faces of men, and their hair was as the hair of women, and their teeth were as the teeth of lions, and they had breastplates, and it were the breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was as the sound of chariots of many horses running into battle. And they had tails like unto scorpions, and there were stings in their tails. So, and the power was to hurt men 5 months, and they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon, but in the Greek tongue he has the name of Apollyon. One woe is past, and behold, there come two woes more hereafter. So we're told that the ultimate leader and inspirer of this was the empire of Satan. So note that the name in the Hebrew and the Greek, and it helps us identify the sphere of influence and the woe of influence in the prophecy. It was to occupy Israel and Jerusalem and inflict in particular the Eastern and Greek parts of the Roman Empire and the Byzantines, both the Hebrew and the Greek speaking areas of the old Roman Empire. So the swarm of these insects darken the air and appear at a distance like clouds of smoke. The noise they make in flying is frightful and stunning, like that of a waterfall. So note this quote is from a book about travels in 1792, and they use the symbolism of locusts and great smoke, etc. It's kind of interesting. So in the 7th century, you can read this quote here about an extraordinary individual, founded religious system, talking about the Arabians and the Mohammedans and the banner that they had. And it was likened to locusts, and that's a quote in 1825. And if we go onward and still onward in 1891, here's another quote about the flights of locusts. And again, it's very significant that we see, and I've repeated this, that in the Bible, in Revelation, it says, here's the prophecy. And then we look, a secular historian that has no dog in the fight, no bone to pick with anybody, basically confirming the prophecy in Revelation. So we see the tribes are likened to the locusts that are there. And of course, we understand this. The Muslim faith as it spread, the horses, the locusts, and theirs was to basically convert by death. You know, you convert to Islam or we will take you off. So the Persian Empire soon attracted these locusts, and that was, of course, now going to be a vehicle, was that the Muhammad and the followers of Muhammad under Islam would then have this point where the Ottoman Empire would now basically incorporate the Persian Empire. And the Persian is Iran and Iraq and a lot of those areas out towards Afghanistan and other places. You know, the Muslims made it all the way to the Philippines, didn't they, Jocelyn? Just outside of Jocelyn's town in Davao. So in the passage, in the letter, you can read a little bit about that. The Pope unwittingly applies the symbol of the prophecy to the Saracens. So this is from the history of Latin Christianity in 1854. Let's take a look at it. So Ravenna, as we remember, there's Rome and Ravenna on the left, and that was the seat of the Roman Empire, and Constantinople, the Eastern Empire. And we'll just take a look here. Here's Mecca and Medina, 622 and 632, where Muhammad was born, and he kind of went along. And, you know, again, anybody that knows the story, he was befriended by Christians, and at one point thought, you know, we're going to pray towards Jerusalem, but then quickly turned against that. And when he found that converting people and saying there is only one God and get rid of all your idols, it wasn't working so well. Eventually, the killing and torturing and other methods of conversion were instituted. And in fact, his followers held him up as basically an idol and used that because he didn't live a long time. And so it's the second and the third generations after Muhammad that basically said, hey, let's go. We'll use him as our poster boy, and we're going to go forth and we're going to kill people. And this is the beginning of the Islamic Empire in the Arabian Peninsula. And there you go. Now it's spreading out. You can see it there throughout Syria, Jordan, Egypt, Northern Africa, all the way in through Iraq and on the borders of Iran, and then eventually into Iran, into Tunisia, and then of course they took over Spain, and the whole of Spain was taken over at that time as well. And the prophet license was to inflict and not to kill. So there was some killing there, but they basically maimed a lot of people and took over as captive a lot of people. And so the areas were overtaken by the Saracens are the same areas that are normally affected by the locusts. As we mentioned, the 5 months is the natural period of time. So there you go. And so their arrest in Western Europe and the split within their ranks, they divided the Caliphate. Caliphate is what they referred to as their religious rule, which was that it would be a religious leader rather than a king that would have rule over them. And so the caliphates lasted until 762. Baghdad and etc. And the Islamic Empire remained a great force for hundreds of years, and its power declined and waned in the pursuit of luxury. And again, you see that where there's divisions in there, and every empire will have that rise and that fall momentum. Now, it's interesting that we see the prophecy talk about crowns of gold on their head, and this is actually what they look like. These are some symbols that we see, and this is the pictures of them. And there's an Arabian poem that talks about the fact that they took their long flowing hair and tied it up under their turbans, as it were. So the hair as women and crowns of gold are very symbolic, and you can see that the particular symbolism again being fulfilled in this prophecy. The faces were the faces of men, and you can see, and their hair was that of women, and they were very long haired. So, and so keep your hair short, guys, All right. So anyway, he adjusted himself properly, twirling his whiskers, folding up his hair under his turban, drawing it off from his shoulders, and his hair flowed down to his shoulders. And we hang him up by his hair. This is a story about the Arabian territory. And their teeth were as the teeth of lions. And we see the symbol of their ferocity. And the Arabian poem of Antar describes the Arabian armies with the imagery of both locusts and lions, as you can read in this Arabian tale that is there for you to read. Okay, and we see another quote here. Many people in armies have, of course, been described as lion-hearted and fighting like lions, and the fact that the Saracens were described this way simply demonstrates that the symbolism of the prophecy is appropriate. And Ali, whom Muhammad named the Lion of God. And so Islam, supposedly a religion of peace, in 1400, the fanatical tone and language hasn't changed much as you take a look at this quote here. And basically dash out his teeth, break his legs, rise up the belly, etc. So and again, at this point, it's a good point to bring up that all the death and the destruction and the mayhem by the Islamic armies, quite often when we run into public discourse, people will say, oh yeah, well, remember the Christians had the Crusades. Well, when you look at all the death and the battles and the murders, the rapes, the beheadings that were done during the Mohammedan or Islamic advance compared to the Crusades, I think, they've got 4 battles versus 300 by the Muslims. So you don't have to back into a corner and go, yeah, no, the answer was that the Crusades were initially a defensive battle that was fought to basically stop the onslaught that was coming. As even the outskirts of Paris, France, was feeling the pressure to succumb to this religion. and justifiably they fought back. And you can say it was a vehicle of God to turn the tide, as it were, and allow Christian pilgrims to go to Jerusalem. And yes, along the way, as with any battle that is headed by man, there were some cases where some of the men decided that, hey, look at this, we've got some extra money, let's go in and take some extra money, rather than staying focused on let's liberate Jerusalem so that we can go there and worship against it. So remember that the defensive battle was the Crusades, and we didn't start it. They declared the war against the Christians, and again, nominal Christian, etc. No judgment on that, but the fact was that, yep, there was a couple of times in the Crusades people got a little carried away and did some bad things. That happens in war, but we were in a defensive situation where the world would have been completely taken over, because Islam had that goal of the world domination, as we see. So back onto the breastplate. There's the breastplates of iron that they had, and 15,000 men were there. They were ready. They were clothed with iron armor and all of that stuff there. Kind of cool. There we go. God gave them coats of mail. These are actual statues. And this is a quote from the Quran. God has given coats of mail to defend you in your wars. And here you go, back to Revelation 9, verses 1 to 12. And we see the torment of 5 months. As we mentioned, the strange thing is that that's the 5 months that the locusts are allowed there. So Muhammad instructed his warriors not to destroy the fruitful greenery. And we can read this quote in 1748. But it is in vain that he offered the freedom to the slaves of Tayet, that he violated his own laws by the extirpation of the fruit trees. After the siege of 20 days, the prophet sounded a retreat. So we see here in the historical instructions to the Sarkisians to spare the fruitful trees and the plants, but to kill and afflict the shaven-headed priests. So remember, destroy no palm trees, no fields, corn, etc. Do no mischief to the cattle, only kill what you have to eat. And then when you go in, you'll find some religious people who live retired in monasteries. Let them alone, neither kill them nor destroy them. But you will find another sort of people that belong to the synagogue of Satan, who have shaven crowns. Be sure you cleave their skulls and give them no quarter till they either turn to become Mohammedans, Islam, or pay tribute. And that's a true quote from Muhammad. Okay, so in First Kings, it talks about the king answers to his people, and it talks about the heavy yoke, and I will chastise you with scorpions. So this is a warning in the ancient prophecies of Judaism, basically paraphrasing what we see in Revelation, that the locusts would have the power, and then the scorpions were going to sting and bring about that devastation. So keep that in mind. Okay, and now, Son of Man, be not afraid of them, neither be afraid of their words through the briars, etc. And that's the continuing of the quote in Ezekiel 2, verse 6. So Ezekiel knew a thing or two, and we can see again the prophecies do point out that if you're rebellious, if you forsake God, the scorpion will be a rebuke against a rebellious house. There is the prophetic 150 days. Remember that 5 times 30, that's the typical month. The lunar month is 30 days. And that makes 150 days, which we often translate into 150 years. And if we look, that Muhammad proclaims his mission 612, exactly 150 years later, 762, the Eastern Caliphate is established in Baghdad. Quite amazing. So we can see the preacher there in 612, and we can read on. Let's just see if I have any note here about that I want to. Yeah, there's a lot of information, but nothing that is there. But there's more information about that available online. So here we go. There's the Baghdad on the right there, and that's the Caliphate. So the plague of locusts throughout Egypt in Moses' time was turned back by a mighty strong western wind, which took away the locusts and cast them into the Red Sea after being defeated by Charles Martel in the Battle of Tours, a famous historical battle in the Western Empire in AD 733, 732, and a split within the Caliphate. The Sarkisians similarly retired to the east to build Baghdad, Iraq, right? Baghdad's Iraq. Okay. So they thereafter ceased to be an aggressive, expanding threat. The Sarkisians hoped to overwhelm the West and the Eastern empires and meet in the middle, totally overtaking the area of the old Roman Empire. The prophecy, however, said that they would not be permitted to kill those men which have not the seal of God on their forehead. And so therefore they had the political, etc. Rather, it was given that they should not kill them, but they should be tormented for 5 months. So the woe is under the next trumpet that would be permitted to kill the remainder of the old Roman Empire, the eastern third part of men. Okay, and the city of peace, Jerusalem, right? So that's the ancient painting in Baghdad. It now becomes Baghdad as a city of peace. Quite interesting. That was the way the Arabians and the Caliphate thought of itself. Revelation 9, as we see, I marvel that you are so soon removed from him that called you under grace unto another gospel. Sorry, that's mislabeled. That's Galatians 6, of course, which is not another, but there may be some that trouble you and would pervert the gospel of Christ. But though an angel from heaven preach any other gospel unto you other than that which is preached unto you, let him be accursed. Yeah, Galatians 1, 6 through 9. As we have said before, and so as I say again, if any man preach any other gospel unto you other than you have received, let him be accursed. So we know in Revelation quite often we refer to Muhammad as the false prophet. We'll get into that further later on. And there is the end of our talk.